the cat light on. There's no cats in there, but let me go get that real quick. Doing pretty good, Crimson. So I hope you had a good week. As it is Friday. And congrats on getting first, Matsu, and congrats on getting second, Crimson. And Cool Skeleton is in. So, I'd had the poll up this week to see what new book I would be doing. Well, apparently X didn't bother counting votes. Because one of my other author friends said he had voted for one and that he didn't know why it didn't count. So feeling drowsy. Drowsy's good. You can always fall asleep listening to me because I'm fairly good at that. But I'm glad you came in. I'm glad it's been a good week. Mine's been kind of hit and miss this week, but I always feel better with fairy tales. And this is not a long fairy tale, as it's only 3 chapters. But I haven't said anything about what fairy tale this was yet. Well, no problem, Crimson. We're all good about lurking in here. I could go over to the fairy tale screen, but you notice I don't have the book showing. I was honestly tempted to try to find a version of it to show the book behind me, because one of the main things about this book is artwork. Because the artwork is really good in the story. But the book of artwork came out a few years before the story did. And once I'm not going to read the prologue for this one, because the foreword of this book is oddly not out of copyright yet, but the rest of the book is. The artwork is outside of copyright, which is useful. So, I will show you what book it is. Ta-da! As I said, I was wanting to show the actual artwork with it, but that's trickier than I thought it would be. And I really just kind of decided to throw this book in because, well, I got no votes on the poll. But I figured I would throw this one in since it is an entry-link fairy tale, which I'm surprised did not end up in its own fairy book. So in my edits, I'm going to put it with it. So this is kind of series 21 and a half. But next week it will be Romanian fairy tales or gypsy tales. I need a book stand on my desk. Well, not the one in my picture, the one in front of me. But the desk I stream from is not big enough to get one, so just have to really weightless sensuality and retroactive cordiality. That's just, yeah, banned. And it's 2 in a row again. And it's AI viewers. I guess it'll at least be some interaction. And get those reported. Because Storybot doesn't report them, it just bans them. But AI viewers through streamboo.com. Let's not say we didn't. I'm lurking a stream where someone is eating. Okay. And it says they have been actioned already, so Twitch is doing something fast. Besides, getting money apparently. But anyway, everyone feel free to settle back. Relax. And I will read you a story. Chapter 1. The Princess Nobody. Once upon a time when fairies were much more common than they are now, there lived a king and queen. Their country was close to fairyland, and very often the little elves would cross over the border and come into the king's fields and gardens. The girl fairies would swing out on the boughs of the fuchsias and loll on the leaves and drink the little dewdrops that fell down the stems. Here you may see all the fairies making themselves merry at the picnic on fuchsia, and an ugly little dwarf is climbing up the stalk. It is describing one of the pictures. Now the king and queen of the country next to fairyland were very rich, and very fond of each other, but one thing made them unhappy. They had no child, neither boy nor girl, to sit on the throne when they were dead and gone. Often the queen said she wished she had a child, even if it were no bigger than her thumb, and hoped that fairies might hear her and help her. But they never took any notice. One day, when the king had been counting all his money all day, that day when the tributes were paid in, he grew very tired. He took off his crown and went into his garden. Then he looked round his kingdom and said, "Oh, I would give it all for a baby." No sooner had the king said this than he heard a little squeaking voice near his foot. "You shall have a lovely baby if you will give me what I ask." The king looked down, and there was the funniest little dwarf he had ever seen. He had a high red cap like a flower, and a big mustache and a short beard that curled outwards. His cloak was red like his cap, but his coat was green, and he rode on a green frog. Many people would have been frightened, but the king was used to fairies. "You shall have a beautiful baby if you will give me what I ask," said the dwarf again. "I will give you anything you like," said the king. Then promise to give me Niente, said the dwarf. Certainly, said the king, who had not an idea that Niente meant. How will you take it? I will take it, said the dwarf, in my own way, on my own day. And with that he set spurs to his frog, which cleared the garden path in one bound, and he was soon lost among the flowers. The next day a dreadful war broke out between the ghosts and the giants, and the king had to set forth and fight on the side of his friends, the giants. A long, long time he was away, nearly a year, and at last he came back to his own country, and he heard all the bells in the churches ringing merrily. What can be the matter? Said the king, and he hurried to his palace, where all the courtiers rushed out and told him the queen had got a baby. Boy or girl? Said the king. A princess, your majesty, said the nurse, with a low curtsy, correcting him. Well, you may fancy how glad the king was, though he would have preferred a boy. What have you called her? He asked. Till your majesty's return, we thought it better not to christen the princess, said the nurse. So we have called her by the Italian name for nothing. Niente. The Princess Niente, your majesty. When the king heard that, he remembered that he had promised to give Niente to the dwarf. He hid his face in his hands and groaned. Nobody knew what he meant or why he was so sad, so he thought it best to keep it to himself. He went in and kissed the queen and comforted her, and looked at the baby. The baby never was there a baby so beautiful. She was like a fairy's child, and so light she could sit on a flower and not crush it. She had little wings on her back, and all the birds were very fond of her. Peasants and common people, who said they could not see why the first royal baby should be called Ninety, always spoke to her in Princess Nobody. Only the courtiers called her Niente. The water fairy was her godmother, for fairy reasons. They concealed her real name. And, of course, she was not christened Niente. Here you may see her sitting, teaching the little birds to sing. And they're all around her in a circle, and each of them singing his very best. Great fun she had with all her little companions, with the birds, here they are, riding on them and tumbling off when the bird kicks. And here again you may observe the baby princess riding a parrot, while one of her maids of honor teases an owl. Never was there such a happy country. All birds and babies playing together, singing, and as merry as the day is long. Well, this joyful life went on until Princess Niente was growing quite a big girl. She was nearly 14. Then one day came a tremendous knock at the palace gates. Out rushed the porter and saw a little dwarf in a red cap and a red cloak, riding a green frog. Tell the king he is wanted, said the dwarf. The porter carried this rude message, and the king went trembling to the door. I have come to claim your promise. You give me Niente, said the dwarf in his froggy voice. Now the king had spoken long ago about his foolish promise to the queen of the water fairies, a very powerful person, and the godmother of the child. The dwarf must be one of my people if he rides a frog, the queen of the water fairies had said. Just send him to me if he is troublesome. The king remembered this when he saw the dwarf, so he put a bold face on. That's you, is it? Said the king to the dwarf. Just you go to the queen of the water fairies. She will have a word to say to you. When the dwarf heard this, it was his turn to tremble. He shook his little fist at the king, and he half drew his sword. I'll have Niente yet, he said, and he set spurs to his frog and bounded off to see the queen of the water fairies. It was night by the time the dwarf reached the stream where the queen lived, among the long flags and rushes and reeds of the river. Here you see him by the river. Oh, tired his frog looks. He is talking to the water fairy. Well, he and the water fairy had a long talk, and at the end of it was that the fairy found only one way of saving the princess. She flew to the king and said, "I can only help you by making the princess vanish clean away. I have a bird here on whose back she can fly to safety. The dwarf cannot get her, but you will never see her again unless a brave prince can find her where she is hidden and guarded by the water fairies." Then the poor mother and father cried dreadfully, but they saw that there was no hope. It was better that the princess should vanish away than she should be married to a horrid rude dwarf who rode a frog. So they sent for the princess and kissed her and embraced her and wept over her, and gradually she faded out of their arms and vanished clean away. And then she flew away on the bird's back. Chapter 2. In Mushroomland. Now all the kingdom next to the fairyland was miserable, and all the people were murmuring, and the king and queen were nearly melted in tears. They thought of all ways they could recover their poor daughter, and at last the queen hit on a plan. "My dear," she said to the king, "let us offer to give our daughter for a wife to any prince who will only bring her, will find her and bring her home." "Who will want to marry a girl they can't see?" said the king. "If they have not married pretty girls they can see, they won't care for poor Niente." "Never mind, we can only try," said the queen. So she sent out messengers into all the world, and sent a picture of the princess everywhere, and proclaimed that the beautiful Princess Niente, and no less than 3/4 of the kingdom, would be given to the prince that could find the princess and bring her home. And there was to be a great tournament, or a sham fight at the palace, to amuse all the princes before they went on the search. So many princes gathered together, all full of hope, and they rode against each other with spears and swords, and knocked each other about, and afterwards dined, danced, and made merry. Some fairy knights, too, came over the border, and they fought with spears, riding beetles and grasshoppers instead of horses. Here's a picture of the joust tournaments between two fairy knights. By all these warlike exercises, they increased their courage till they felt brave enough to fight all the ghosts and all the giants, if they could only save the beautiful princess. Well, the tournaments were over, and off all the princes went into fairyland. What sunny sights they saw in fairyland! They saw a great snail race, the snails running so fast that some of the fairy jockeys fell off in the grass. They saw a fairy boy dancing with a squirrel, and they found all the beasts and birds quite friendly and kind, and were able to talk to other people. This was a way in old times, but now no beasts talk, and no birds, except parrots. And occasionally a storyteller. Now, among all this gallant army of princes, one was ugly, and he looked old and bold. The rest laughed at him, and called him the Prince Comical. But he had a kind heart. One day, when he was out walking alone, and thinking what he could do to find the princess, he saw 3 sad boys teasing a dragonfly. They had got hold of one of his legs, and were pulling at it with all their might. Then the Prince Comical saw this, and he ran up and drove the bad boys away, and rubbed the limb of the dragonfly, till he gave up groaning and crying. Then the dragonfly sat up, and said in a weak voice, "You have been very kind to me. What can I do for you?" "Oh, help me," said the prince. "And to find Princess Niente, you fly everywhere. Don't you know where she is?" Thank you for either guilty. "I don't know," said the dragonfly mournfully. "I have never flown this far, but I know that you are in a very dangerous part of fairyland, and I will take you to an aged black beetle who can give you the best advice." So saying, the dragonfly walked off with the prince until they came to the black beetle. Can you tell this prince, said the dragonfly, where Princess Nyata is hidden? No, it's in Mushroom Land, said the beetle. But you will want a guide. Will you be my guide? Asked the prince. Yes, said the beetle. But what about your friends, the other princes? Oh, they must come too. It would not be fair to leave them behind, said the prince comical. He was the soul of honor, and though the others laughed at him, he would not take advantage of his luck and run away from them. Well, you are a true knight, said the black beetle. But before we go into the depths of the Mushroom Kingdom, you come here with me. Then the black beetle pointed out to the prince a great smooth round thing a long way off. This is the first mushroom of Mushroom Land, said the beetle. Now come with me and you will see what you will see. So the prince followed the beetle until they came to the mushroom. Climb up and look over, said the beetle. So the prince climbed up and looked over. There he saw a crowned king, sound asleep. Here is Prince Comical, you see him, very handsome. And here is a king, so sound asleep. Try to awaken him, said the beetle. Just try. So the prince tried to waken the king, but it was of no use. Now, take warning by that, said the black beetle, and never go to sleep under a mushroom in the mushroom country. You'll never wake, and if you do, the Princess Niete is found again. Well, Prince Comical said he would remember that, and he is a and he and the beetle went off to find the other princes. They were disposed to laugh at being led by a black beetle, but one of them, who was very learned, reminded them that armies had been led before the woodpeckers, and wolves, and hummingbirds. As they marched through the Mushroom Kingdom, twilight came upon them again, and the elves came out for their dance, for elves only dance at dusk. And they could not help joining them, which is very imprudent, as they had plenty to do the next day. And it would have been wiser if they'd gone to sleep. The elves went on with their play till midnight. Exactly the midnight, the elves stopped their play and undressed and got up into the boughs of a big tree and went to sleep. You may wonder how the elves know when it was midnight, as there are no clocks in the mushroom. Of course. But they cannot really help knowing, as at exactly at 12, the mushrooms begin to grow, and the little mushrooms come up. Now the elves covered every branch of the tree, as you see in the picture, and the princes did not know where to lie down, and at last they decided to lie down under a very big mushroom. It was in vain that the black beetle and Prince Comical warned them to beware. Nonsense, they said. You may sleep in the open air if you like, but we make ourselves comfortable here. And so they lay down under the shelter of a mushroom, and Prince Comical slept in the open air. In the morning, he awakened, feeling very well and hungry, and set off to call his friends. But he might have well called the mushroom itself. There they all lay under its shade, and some of them had their eyes open, not one of them could move. The prince shook them, he dragged them, he shouted at them, he pulled their hair. But the more he shouted and dragged, the louder they snored. And the worst of it was that he could not pull them out of the shadow of the magic mushroom. So there, he had to leave them sound asleep. The prince thought the elves could help him, perhaps, so he went and asked them how to awaken his friends. They were all awake, and the fairies were dressing the baby elves, but they said only, "Oh, it's their fault for sleeping under the mushroom. Anybody would know that it's a stupid thing to do. Besides, we have no time to attend to them, as the sun will be up soon, and we must get these babies dressed and be off before then." Why, where are you going to? Said the prince. Nobody knows where we go in the daytime, said the elves, and nobody does. Well, what am I to do? Said the prince to the black beetle. I don't know where the princess is, said the beetle, but the bluebird is very wise, and he may know. But now your best plan is to steal two of the bluebird's eggs, and not give them back until he tells you all he can. So, off they set for the bluebird's nest, and to make a long story short, the prince stole two of the eggs, and would not give them back till the bird promised to tell him all he knew. And the end of it was that the bird carried him to the court of the queen of the mushroom land, and she was sitting in her crown on a mushroom, and she looked rather funny and mischievous. Here you see the prince with his hat off, kissing the queen's hair, and asking for the princess. She is quite safe, said the queen of the mushroom land. But what a funny boy you are. You're not half handsome enough for Princess Niente. The poor prince blushed. They call me Prince Comical, he said. I know I'm not half good enough. You are good enough for anything, said the queen of the mushroom land. But you might be prettier. Then she touched him with her wand. He became as handsome a prince as was ever seen, in a beautiful red silk doublet, slashed with white, and a long gold-colored robe. Now you will do for my Princess Niente, said the queen of the mushroom land. Bluebird. And here she whispered in the bird's ear. Now take him to Princess Niente. So they flew. And they flew. All day and all night. Night, Skeleton. And next day they came to a green bower, all full of fairies and butterflies and funny little people. And there, with her long yellow hair around her, there sat Princess Niente. And the Prince Charming laid his crown at her feet and knelt on one knee and asked the princess to be his love and his lady. And she did not refuse him. So they were married in the Church of Elves, and the glowworms set as torches, and all the bells and the flowers were made to merry peal. And soon they were to travel home, to the king and the queen. Chapter 3. Lost and Found. Now the prince had found the princess, and you might think that they had nothing to do but to go home again. And the father and mother of the princess were very weary and very much. The father and mother of the princess were wearying very much to hear about her. Every day they climbed to the barzatine of the castle and looked across the plain, hoping to see dust on the roof and some brave prince riding back with their daughter. But she never came, and their hair grew gray with sorrow and time. The parents of the other princes, too, who were all asleep under the mushroom, were alarmed about their sons and feared that they had been taken prisoner, or perhaps eaten up by some giant. The Princess Niente and Prince Charming were lingering in the enchanted land, too happy to leave the flowers, the brooks, and the fairies. The faithful black beetle often whispered to the prince that it should be time to turn homewards, but the prince paid no more attention to his ally than he had to an earwig. So there, in the magical valley, the prince and princess might be wandering to this day, but for a very sad accident. The night they were married, the princess had said to the prince, You may now call me Niente, or any pet name you like, but never call me by my real name. But I don't know it, said the prince. Do tell me what it is. Never, said the princess. You must never seek it to know. Why not, said the prince. Something dreadful will happen, said the princess, if you ever find out my name and call me by it. And she looked quite as if she could be very angry. Now, ever after this, the prince kept wondering what his wife's real name could be, though he made himself quite unhappy. "Is it Margaret?" he would say. Then he thought the princess was off her guard. Or, "Is it Joan? Or is it Dorothy? It can't be Sybil, can it?" But she would never tell him. Now, one morning the princess awoke very early. She felt so happy that she could not sleep. She lay awake and listened to the birds singing, and then she watched a fairy boy teasing a bird which sang, so the boy said, out of tune, another fairy baby riding on a fly. At last the princess, who thought the prince was sound asleep, began to croon softly a little song she had made about him and her. She had never told him about the song, partly because she was shy, and partly for another reason. She crooned and hummed to herself. "Oh, hand in hand with Gwendolyn, while yet our locks are gold, we'll fare among the forests green, and through the gardens old. And when, like leaves that lose their green, our gold has turned to gray, then hand in hand with Gwendolyn, we'll fade and pass away." "Oh, Gwendolyn is your name, is it?" said the prince, who had been wide awake and listened to her song. And he began to laugh at having found out her secret, and tried to kiss her. But the princess turned very, very cold and white like marble, so that the prince began to shiver, and he sat down on a fallen mushroom and hid his face in his hands, and in a moment all his hair vanished, and his splendid clothes, and his gold train, and his crown. He wore a cap of red, common clothes, and he was Prince Comical once more. But the princess arose, and she vanished swiftly away. Opposite, you see the poor prince crying, and the princess vanishing away. Thus he was punished for being curious and prying. It is natural, you will say, that a man should like to call his wife by her name. But the fairies would not allow it. What is more, there are still some nations who will not allow a woman to mention the name of her husband. Well, here in the sad state of things, the princess was lost as much as ever, and Prince Charming turned back to Prince Comical. The black beetle sighed day and night, and mingled his tears with those of the prince, but neither of them knew what to do. They wandered about the magical valley, and though it was just as pretty as ever, it seemed quite ugly and stupid to them. The worst of it was that the prince felt so foolish. After winning the greatest good fortune and the dearest bride in the world, he had thrown everything away. He talked about crying. "Oh, oh, Niente, dear Niente, return to your Prince Comical, and all will be forgiven." It is impossible to say what would have happened. Probably the prince would have died of sorrow and hunger, for he ate nothing. But the black beetle had not one day met a bat, who was the favorite charger of Puck. Now, Puck, as all the world knows, is the jester of the court of Fairyland. He can make Oberon and Titania, king and queen, laugh with the tricks he plays, and therefore they love him so much that there's nothing they would not do for him. So the black beetle began to talk about his master, the prince, to the bats. Puck commonly rode. And the bat, a good-natured creature, told the whole story to Puck. Now, Puck was also in a good humor, so he jumped at once on his bat's back and rode off to consult the king and queen of Fairyland. Well, they were sorry for the prince. He had only broken one little fairy law, after all. And they sent Puck back to tell him what he was to do. This was to find the bluebird again, and get the bluebird to guide him to the home of the water fairy, the godmother of the princess. Long and far the prince wandered, and at last he found the bluebird once more. And the bird, very good-naturedly, promised to fly in front of him till he led to the beautiful stream where the water fairy held her court. So they reached it at last, and the bluebird harnessed himself to the chariot of the water fairy, and the chariot was a white cup of a water lily. Then he pulled and pulled the chariot, where he was dragging away the water fairy, till he brought her where the prince was waiting. At first, when she saw him, she was rather angry. "Why did you find out my goddaughter's name?" she said, and the prince had no excuse to make. He only turned red inside. This rather pleased the water fairy. "Do you love the princess so very much?" she said. "Oh, more than all the world," said the prince. "Go back, you, to Mushroom Land, and we'll find her in the old place. But perhaps she will not be pleased to forgive you at first." The prince thought he would chance that, and so he did not say so. He only bowed very low and thanked the water fairy. Then off he set with the bluebird to guide him in search of the Mushroom Land. At long last he reached it, and glad he was to see the little sentinel on the border of the country. Up and down Mushroom Land the prince searched, and at last he saw his own princess, and he rushed up and knelt at her feet and held out his hand to ask pardon for disobeying fairy law. But she was still rather cross. She jumped down and ran around the mushroom, and he ran after her. So he chased her for a minute or two, and at last she laughed and popped up her head over the mushroom, and pursed her lips into a cherry. And then she kissed across the mushroom, and he knew he had won back their princess, and they even felt happier than they had ever been if they had never parted. Journeys end in lovers meeting, and so do stories. Thank you for the hydrate. Journeys end in lovers meeting, and so do stories. The prince has his princess once again, and I can tell you they did not wait long this time in the valley. Off they went, straight home, and the black beetle guided them, flying in a beeline. Just on the farther border of Mushroomland, they came to all the princes, fast asleep. But when the princess drew near, they all awakened, jumped up, and they slapped the fortunate prince on the back and wished him luck and cried, "Hello, comical old chap, we hardly knew you. Why, you've grown quite handsome." And so he had. He was changed into Prince Charming again. But he was so happy he never noticed it, for he was not conceited. But the princess noticed it, and she loved him all the better. Then they all made a procession, with the black beetle marching at the head. Indeed, they called him the Black Rod now, as he was quite the courtier. So with flags flying and music playing, they returned to the home of the princess. And the king and queen met them at the gates, and fell on the necks of the prince and princess, and kissed them, and laughed, and cried for joy, and kissed them again. You may be sure that the old nurse was among the foremost. Her face was quite shining with pleasure, and using longer words than the noblest there. And she admired the prince very much, and was delighted that her girl had, as she called the princess, had got such a good husband. So here we leave them, and the country remained always happy, and so it has neither history nor geography. Therefore you won't find it on any map, nor can you read about it in any book, but this one. Lastly, here's a picture of the prince and princess at home, sitting on a beautiful rose, as a fairy's godchild can do if she so pleases. As for the black beetle, he was appointed to a place about the court, but he never married and he had no children, and there are no other black beetles, consequently, in the country where the prince and princess became king and queen. Erant olim rex quidium heterogena. Lewis. All Shadas, as Broad says, in half-forgotten fairy days, there lived a king once and a queen. Few there were, as more have been. And still we love the well-worn phrase, to love to tread the ancient ways. To break the fence, to seize the maze, to see the beauty we have seen. All Stratis. Here's luck to every child that stays in fairyland among the fays, that follows through the forest green, prince comical and wonderful, that reads the tales we used to praise, all Shadowless. As I said, that was a short story. Now, I didn't really have any plans beyond reading the story. I'm not sure why Andrew Lang did not put it in my book, other than the fact it would have had to be used all Richard Doyle's illustrations. Seeing as he republished it with his own poem to go with it, I don't know why he didn't. Princess Nobody came out after the arc. Robert Doyle did the artwork. Oh, Richard Doyle did the artwork. Fairyland. A few years before Andrew Lang got his hands on the book, and he made a fairy tale to go with it. It's the original book by Richard Doyle. It's just illustrations, and Fairyland a series of pictures from the elf world. Then the pictures were used again by Andrew Lang. The Princess Nobody, a tale of Fairyland, which is basically what I just narrated. You can tell that he was trying to draw attention to the illustrations because he was telling you to look at the illustrations while reading the book. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get the pictures and edit them into it when I'm doing the narration, but I might be able to do that in the video edit. What's really funny is my copy came from Thirst Books, which, sadly I'm no longer an affiliate for. It's my second affiliate I've lost, but I still have links to it. But the original sale for this book was in Barnes & Noble. It's got one of the old regular print label makers. And it was $1. The copy I have was 1979. Again, republished, all the images and everything else. The only difference between this and the original book, supposedly, is a foreword. Harry Wilkins. And he does talk about the pictures, but the artwork doesn't quite match them. Because the dragonfly he mentions in it, going by the illustration, is more of a grasshopper. But at the time in England, it was called Daddy Longlegs. Looking at the illustration, it's grasshopper. But people didn't realize grasshoppers had wings. Because it's got the two set of wings, which would make you think dragonfly. But no, it's a grasshopper. No, I guess technically it'd be a cockchafer, but still. It looks the same. But yeah. Again, I can't think of anything else to do. I do need to find an illustration for the gypsy fairy tales, or gypsy lore, which I've got a week to find. But I do thank everyone for coming in. I said, sorry it's kind of a short stream, but I didn't want to start a full book until I got verification of what I was going to do. Yeah. So if... Oh, thank you. I may have to see if I can edit the illustrations in when I edit the video. I mean, most of them should be able to be found online. So. But yeah, I guess we need to find someone to read. The cider's over. Don't see any of the other readers on. Hey, Magical is reading another Witcher book. So do we want to listen to The Witcher? Do we want to find someone playing games? Triple Fox is reading The Mystery of the Mayas. Yeah, I've only got 2 readers on my list that are streaming, so. I like the fact that Lang drew in Puck, which means that this fairyland would fall more into the French regions, French and Italian. Definitely Italian, since they named the girl Nobody in Italian. But, yeah. Can't see anyone really to raid, so I guess I will just say goodnight then. Oh yeah, the music playing before the exterior shot is actually called Opening a Book. It's in one of the miscellaneous music things I downloaded from Humble Bundle. Just like the one playing now is Take Your Pick, which is, you know, playing with a pick. But my closing one is called Sleeping Student. So, good night everyone. I hope you have some wonderful fairy tale based streams.